The next speaker we have is Ron Boltz, property tax expert.
Hey, Ron.
On behalf of the Pennsylvania Liberty Alliance, the first thing I'd like to do is thank Ron Snell and the other event organizers for having me here to speak. It's an honor and a privilege. Thank you, Ron. Before I begin, I'm going to have to give a little bit of a disclaimer here. We've been accused of painting with a broad brush, and some legislators are getting upset at some of the remarks being said here today. I think that some of the earlier remarks about the number of legislators who are not only in this building, but who have also pledged support to this bill versus the number of those who showed up, that's what's driving the remarks. So I just wanted to, yes, we do paint with a little bit of a broad brush, but for the most part, we believe the numbers speak for themselves, and we are accurate in what we're saying. Here we are once again, another event in the Capitol, this time on the day after the Super Bowl and before primary season. I can't help but wonder if property tax elimination proponents are going to once again play the role of Charlie Brown, gearing up to kick the football while the legislature once again plays the role of Lucy and yanks the ball away after it's too late, after we've already committed to kicking the ball, and after they're elected once more. My message today is to let the legislators know that Charlie Brown's patience is wearing thin. Right now, he's shifting his focus from kicking the football to kicking Lucy out of office. As we gather here once again before an election, we're already starting to hear the talk about property taxes. Like clockwork, it's being rolled out to be used as the election season issue that it always has been. It's very reliable that way. I've read that Senator Scarnati wants to vote on elimination, so the question that we all have is he serious, or is he just playing Lucy? Are we going to get this vote, or is it going to be the same old game? Promises made in the primary, then nothing's done before the general election, because we certainly can't work on a controversial issue where even more promises will be made to get people elected in the general. And then, of course, after the general election comes the budget season, and of course we can't do anything then either. So from today, another year and a half will have passed. Charlie Brown will be busy working very hard to pay his taxes, and this issue gets no attention once again until next election season when we dust off that old football once more. You've promised us that if we continue to play the game by your rules, that eventually we'll get to kick that football. We're told that we have to treat Lucy with the utmost respect. Call her Honorable Lucy, like her name tag says. And don't get mad at Lucy, because she holds the football, and if she walks away, well, she'll take her ball with her and there's nothing left to kick, and it'll be game over, we're told. We're told that Lucy actually only pulls that football away because she has real concerns. Maybe Charlie will kick the ball through a window. Maybe he'll go into the side of a car. But it's our job to convince her, to educate her, to keep doing what we're doing, only do more of it. And then she'll be convinced to finally let Charlie Brown kick that football. But Charlie Brown has figured out that Lucy really doesn't need more education. Lucy doesn't want to be educated. She has no incentive to ever let Charlie Brown kick that football so long as he's willing to continue playing by her rules. It's hard for grassroots movements to play Harrisburg's rules and expect to get anything accomplished. How do we overcome campaign money from lobby groups and leadership? How do we overcome the career politicians' desire to climb the ladder, to become a committee chairman, or to have their bills be considered, when leadership tells them, don't you dare push this issue, or we're going to cut off your money, and if you ever expect to have your bills considered, you'd better toe the line. How do we compete with that? The reason this bill hasn't moved is almost entirely political. It's not because of some fear of losing local control. It's not because some legislators believe we need to control spending first. We can look at the pension issue alone to debunk both of those talking points. Schools are not asked to raise property taxes to pay into the botched pension system. They're mandated by Harrisburg to do it. They aren't asked to follow the 1949 school code. They are mandated to do it. That is not local control. That's controlling the locals. It's making homeowners pay for Harrisburg's demands. You can't tell me that legislators really believe spending needs to be controlled first before elimination happens, while we're paying an astounding 35% of payroll into the pension, largely with property taxes, while it's projected to go over 40%, and yet nothing has been done to address this unfunded liability. And besides that, every elimination bill to date has controlled spending, but these same legislators then turn around and say, well, this would result in a funding shortfall. This too is nonsense. There is no funding shortfall. There is only the difference between the unsustainable path we're on today versus a more realistic, more fair way to fund public education. The reason elimination hasn't passed isn't due to some grave concern about economic downturns or the income and sales taxes being too unstable, as we've heard, to fund our schools. The property tax is anything but stable. Ask any homeowner. Compare the property tax rate increases that have taken place over the past 25 years to the PIT and SUT rate increases. The state income tax has been raised only one time, with the sales tax hasn't been raised at all since 1968. What does this year's budget look like compared to the one 25 years ago? How could the tremendous increases in spending over that time period have taken place if the PIT and the SUT were so unstable? If legislators truly think our education system isn't educated enough to budget the same way the state and the average taxpayers do, then please just say that publicly. We have much more confidence in them than many of the legislators here apparently do. Not here and speaking in the building. We certainly believe they can do it. We can't take any legislator seriously who touts the fake concerns about creating winners and losers or shifting the burden to young working families while they introduce reduction schemes that create even more winners and losers, but this time decided by government bureaucracies, of course, and introduce bills that only give relief to certain individuals, would shrink the tax base, and would put even more of a burden on our young working families and make purchasing a first-time home even that much more difficult. We hear that we cannot overcome legislators who vote in a bloc, like the Southeast contingency who oppose us. We hear about opposing legislators who say, well, this isn't a problem in my district. We clearly need to change tactics if these legislators won't support something that we desperately need in our districts, which again is clearly the majority of the state. We clearly need to change tactics if these legislators won't support something that we have been asking for over a decade. The one excuse that has some truth to it, however, is that leadership continues to be a roadblock. There seems to be a bit of a misunderstanding of the logic behind what my organization thinks needs to be done to overcome this. So let me go back to another analogy and tell another story. In this story, Charlie Brown still represents the property tax elimination supporters, but now he's joined the Marine Corps, he's gone through boot camp, and he became a drill instructor. Now he's Gunnery Sergeant Hartman from the movie Full Metal Jacket. He's the guy who's in charge of the raw recruits, who in this story represent our legislators. Among those recruits is Private Pyle. Private Pyle represents our current Senate and House leadership. Now, in the movie, if you've all seen it, Private Pyle just can't get anything right. No matter how hard Sergeant Hartman tries, he just can't get Private Pyle to work hard enough to get over the obstacles, and no matter how hard he tries, Private Pyle continues to store jelly donuts in his unlocked footlocker. And if you haven't seen the movie and you're wondering, what is this guy talking about, just watch it tonight and this will all make sense. Sergeant Hartman realizes that no matter how hard he has worked, no matter how hard he's tried, he just cannot whip Private Pyle into shape. So he changes tactics. He tells the recruits that from now on, when Private Pyle screws up, he will no longer punish him, but he will punish all of them. He tells the rest of the recruits that he has failed because they have failed to help him give Private Pyle the proper motivation. Of course, the recruits think this is completely unfair. Why wouldn't they? After all, they've been working hard. They've been doing their job. They aren't the ones who continue to screw up. But Sergeant Hartman sees no other way to motivate Private Pyle, and he demands that the recruits work even harder to help him, to help the private. Now, if you've seen the movie, you know what happens next, and you know the rather harsh method the recruits use to motivate Private Pyle. So just for the record, this is just a story. I'm not advocating violence, so please no ridiculous accusations or media headlines tomorrow about the elimination supporters coming to the Capitol looking for violence. It's just a story to make a point. But what we are saying is that we will attempt to beat you in an election if that's what's necessary to make Harrisburg and leadership take this issue seriously.
Amen.
So I once again am calling on our supporting legislators in both parties and both chambers to form a property tax caucus, a real caucus that fights, not a useless one like we've seen scores of them under this roof that do nothing. A real caucus that votes as a bloc, just like those who oppose us do. My message to all legislators is that we will reward you for doing this, and so will the voters. You don't need leadership's money. You don't need to toe their line. You don't need the lobbyists' money. If you take a look at this map, if the majority party wishes to stay in the majority, I consider that they consider this map. I suggest they consider this map. And if the minority party wishes to become the majority, again, take a look at this map. This is what the people have been asking for. The next time an opposing legislator comes to one of our guys for support on their issue, I want one of our representatives to say, well, you know what? That's just not a problem in our district, just like they've been doing to us. Stop giving everyone else what they want, thinking that the favor will be returned to us in the future. It never is. It never works that way. If they want your vote, then we demand their vote first. And remember that leadership needs your votes to stay in leadership more than you need their campaign money. You hold the power, and it's time you realize it and use it. It's time to remove them if they will continue to ignore the needs and wants of the Pennsylvanians outside of their own districts, the needs and wants of your constituents. Will the Senate hold Joe Scarnati to his word about wanting to see a vote? Will the House members select another person for Speaker who will be a one-man roadblock like Mike Turzai has been? Just know that if you do, we will hold you accountable for knowingly replacing him with someone else who has a track record of opposing us on this issue, regardless of what promises they may give you for future consideration on this, just to get you to vote for them. Homeowners don't care about your system of choosing leadership based on seniority. They don't care who's next in line or who can raise the most money. They don't care about party politics, and they don't think your political career is nearly as important as you think it is. What they do care about is very simple. They just want to pay no more and no less than their fair share of public education, and they just want to own their homes again. I think it's a pretty reasonable request if you ask me. Thank you very much.